Thank you, Bruce Ruby. Good morning. My name is Janet Grote. I'm your worship associate today. Regina Wood is my backup in case we have technical difficulties, which we came very close to. Karina Poloni is our host today, and Ken Texera is her backup. Welcome to the Treasure Coast Unitarian Universalist Congregation in the charming town of Stuart, Florida. And a welcome to our snowbirds. I don't know which Judy just came in, might be our snowbird Judy. As we begin our time together, as I mentioned, Karina has muted most of you, so we're not distracted by the background noise. We are a welcoming congregation. We welcome people of all gender identities, people of all colors, all backgrounds. Thank you for joining us. Today, we will be celebrating the time which Reverend Paul has spent with us. I'm going to do the chalice lighting now. For the wonder and the inspiration we seek from the sun and stars, and the light of the heavens, we light this chalice. Next, we're going to go to our first hymn and then affirmation. Our hymn is number 323, Break Not the Circle. Now for our affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Now, please raise your hand if you have a personal sorrow or joy to share with us. Karina will call on you. We're all good? Even after all our troubles and getting online on Zoom today, I guess that's not exactly stone moving worthy, but for those of you who have joys and concerns.
We have one.
We have one. Okay. Who is it?
Well, it's Ann Nozawa.
Hi, Ann.
I was reluctant to share this because I think so many of our folks are going through the same kind of thing, and that is intense frustration that I cannot be in a certain place with a certain person when I think it's extremely important. I have a friend from 50 years ago, and we have been friendly and in touch all this time, 50 years. And I believe that if we were to get together, it would be our last goodbye. I hear that she is not doing well. She's in Boston, and I don't know how to describe it. Frustration is a mild term for what I feel, that I can't be with her. And I'm thinking, I'm sure many of us are experiencing, because of our pandemic, the same kind of thing. So I hope I don't speak only for myself, because I'd like to think that we share these things. Thank you.
We do share this with you now. It's such a concern for all of us. Visualize our silk river of joys and concerns landing on a happy beach.
Lynn? Can you hear me?
Yes.
My sadness is that the numbers in Florida of people ill and people dying is going up.
Thank you, Lynn. Something we are all concerned about.
Well, you'll have to unmute yourself.
It's certainly a joy for me to be together with everybody today to celebrate the gifts that Paul has brought in his years of being here.
Yes, we are going to have some specific celebration of Paul, but that's what today is all about. Thank you. Now, as we are remembering Reverend Paul Johnson, the time that he spent with us, let's look at some photos of Paul. Here is our Reverend Paul. Next. And here's Paul, joyfully working. Looks like the book club book that week was White Trash. He brought us all together for leadership in this church. That's our next slide. It's a board of about a year ago. Next slide. Ah, the party animal. Next slide. He sings. He preaches. He sings. Next slide. He brings us joy. Next. He makes us think. Next. He gave us all blessings, including our beloved animals. Next, he shared with us the milestones of our life. This is Shirley Craig's internment ceremony in our memorial garden out front. Next. And he has kept us on our track for social justice. And now we are going to ask Paul to share a few memories of us that he has got with us. Paul?
Thank you, Janet. You know, it was about 5 years ago this coming fall that I called Ken Hurto, the lead here in the Southern region, and said I will be leaving, retiring from Shelter Rock next year, and I really am looking for a part-time position, ministerial position in Florida, and then I want to work part-time as well with the denomination with the Waking Our Vision Legacy Program. And eventually he came across with 3 or 4 possibilities, one of them being steward. And I was excited because the previous 9 years, I had come every February for a meeting in Stewart of a foundation board I was on, the Liberal Religious Charitable Society. And both Carol and I were very impressed with Stewart. And it worked out for the match to be made. And I was so pleased that we were able to come. And so I came October 1st of 2016. And the first weeks, of course, were dedicated to planning the dedication of our new sanctuary. And what a joy it was to be part of that ceremony for our wonderful, entirely paid for, beautiful space, which has meant so much to all of us. And then right after that, we had our planning retreat with Reverend Marnie Harmony to set up our goals for the ministry that we were going to be having together. And it's been renewed every year. You know, it was the initial annual contract, which can be renewed 3 times. And of course, it has been renewed 3 times and is now coming to an end. But the basic areas that we were going to work on have stayed pretty much the same. First of all, membership growth. And I want to thank the membership committees who have been helping with this, where we had our inquiry sessions, our pizza nights, our orientation and welcome of new members. And we've set up a very good welcoming system for people who feel welcome. And we have increased our membership by 1/3 over this course of time, which I think is very good. I appreciate how we've given the opportunities for fellowship for new people, the Adventure Club and the Cook's Night Out and the Coffee Hour. And I'll remember the wonderful hospitality that we set up to welcome new people. Of course, the second area was lifespan religious education. And wasn't it wonderful to have Claudia with us to do our internship and to help us get started on this? I remember it was very difficult for Claudia and I to get that plan passed by the Meadville faculty when we were in Chicago together. But we got it passed, and she was able to start the family life education program with us. And of course, Karina is carrying that on now. And then adult programs and education was the other thing. I've been so pleased with the response to my offerings here with building your own theology and what moves us, and you know, such things as the film series, which Canvas and Karen also added to, and then many other things. I'll never forget one Sunday after church, I was doing a workshop on parliamentary procedure, on Robert's Rules. Can you get me some water? And after the service, I noticed all of these new people. I said, "Oh, it's great to have these visitors with us and to swell the numbers at the workshop." And it turns out that they had heard about this and wanted to bone up on parliamentary procedure because they had a bone to pick with the president of their condo association, and the meeting was coming up and they wanted to be able to challenge him. You know, you never know what an educational opportunity will bring, but that was great. So I really have appreciated that, especially, of course, the Wednesday morning book discussion group. I've learned so much from that and appreciate that so much. But education, of course, has been been a high thing with us. The other area was, of course, community outreach to make our influence known in the wider community. And I was very active, as well as some others in our congregation, in establishing Family Promise, which will be a program of housing and helping homeless families, which was supposed to start this April. The money was gathered, an executive director has been hired, and we hope that once this pandemic comes down, it will be in operation. I was pleased to be able to be very instrumental in getting a host congregation. Presbyterian Church was part of that effort to get them to getting our congregation to be an assist congregation, and for Unity to be an assist congregation as well. So that'll be a wonderful program that will be getting off the ground shortly. And of course, we joined the Interfaith Alliance, and we hosted the first Thanksgiving service here, Interfaith Thanksgiving service, where we had the greatest crowd we've had yet. We had to bring in extra chairs. And of course, we've taken part in that every year, as well as the International Day of Peace celebration at St. Joseph's Church. We, of course, as well, have taken part in the activities of Faith in Florida, the old PICO community organizing group that supported so heavily when I was at Shelter Rock. We were able to host their community educational effort in the fall of 2018 for all the amendments on the ballot. A number of us marched in the protest across Roosevelt Bridge a couple weeks ago to protest the horrific death of George Floyd. A number of us took part in the Juneteenth celebration held in Stewart, downtown Stewart, and many other things. And I've been on the steering committee for the Treasure Coast chapter of Faith in Florida, and I trust you'll keep up that connection. One of the members of the interfaith group said to me just last week, said, you know, I've tried in my congregation to get a social justice committee going. I've never been able to do it. I'm so impressed that you have a social justice committee. So we haven't let our light, hidden our light under a bushel in that term. And of course, the other thing was to encourage legacy giving of people through their wills, their 401ks, their insurance policies, through setting up charitable gifts annuities to support our congregation into the future. I gave several workshops on this. We started a legacy society, and we have gotten over $660,000 in legacy commitments. And of course, one of these has already come to fruition. So I think we've made progress on all of the goals we set for our developmental ministry. And of course, I've appreciated the worship life of our congregation. What a wonderful cadre of worship associates to work with. I've enjoyed our music. Of course, Bruce is carrying on that tradition now. And I just have loved preaching in our sanctuary. To get down from that pulpit and be so close to you, to see the expressions on your faces and your reactions. And as I said, my newsletter piece, I've missed you all. And sometimes I've gone into the sanctuary and kind of imagined looking out at all of your faces. One thing I didn't mention in terms of our community involvement is what Ken has been involved with feeding those in need. And every month, during much of the year, for that group to gather together and do that has been a remarkable commitment. Think of the memorial services where we've said goodbye to so many of members over the last 4 years. I want to thank all of you for your words of encouragement in terms of my ministry. It's been much appreciated, been very, very helpful. And I want to thank those of you who work so diligent in so many different areas of congregational life. In a small congregation, many people often wear many hats, and so many of you had. And I appreciate the commitment that you have made as we have gone forward in terms of worship, education, and fellowship, and social service, and social prophecy. And so Carol and I will never forget you. She's sitting right next to me here. She has not been able to get online like she had hoped to, but she'll be joining the picture with me during the coffee hour.
It's hi.
That's her waving hi. Now, Reverend Bob, who was both my predecessor and now will be my successor, has generously invited Carol and I to continue to be, active in the congregation, and we appreciate that. We'll be following the UU tradition of an incumbent minister when leaving to have a hiatus in terms of involvement, but it could be that sometime in the future we'll be back. But we, for now, we're still living in the area, just to Del Lago, north of the Roosevelt Bridge. There is a possibility of another ministry coming up. I had a Zoom service with this congregation 2 weeks ago, and I'll be with them next Sunday as well. There's reticence on their part to undertake a new ministry during the pandemic, when they're not meeting. So I don't know if this will come to fruition, but that's a possibility on a horizon. Now, in all that I've done with you and all we've done together, my hope is that we have grown spiritually in terms of our 7 UU principles, our wonderful principles. I've been part of General Assembly, the virtual General Assembly this past week, and a committee has been set up to revise our principles. I hope they don't do it for a while. I think we got to live into these even for a little bit longer. But I particularly appreciate the one that is encouragement of each other to spiritual growth in terms of our principles. One of the things I shared with you a while back, and I'll share it with you again, that every morning at 4 a.m., not that I'm reading it at 4 a.m. in my in my email, but I get an email called the First Light Meditation from Galen Enriched of All Souls Church in New York. And this morning's was a really nice one by Deepak Chopra, in which he said, "You are what you see. What you see is a selective act of attention and interpretation." And what Galen wants us to do is to use that as a cynosure, just something to center our attention as we plan the day, realizing that we are grateful for another day of life and that we can do maybe a little bit better in terms of our highest values than we did the day before. And so I meditated on that piece of wisdom this morning. But I also took part in Galen Gingrich's workshop, GA workshop yesterday. And it was so wonderful to hear him speak about his new book on gratitude. But that's the way he suggests that we start the day with gratitude and hope of possibility. I would say probably my favorite reading, it's between 2 readings in our hymn book. One is the book is number 466 on religion by Vincent Silliman, and the other one is from Kalidasa and the ancient Sanskrit from the Indian tradition. And I've shared this with many times, and I share it with you now as my final gift and suggestion and sort of wrap up of my ministry to you in terms of looking to each day in gratitude and growth. Look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the verities and realities of your existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, and the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today, this day, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day. So may it be for all of us, this day and the days to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Next, we are going to have a message from Karen Frank, our board president, and then messages from a few of our members. Karen says, a lot of what ministers do is invisible to members of the congregation. It's a lot of that invisible work that I've seen working with Paul, and I want to acknowledge and appreciate. One of the first things I think of is how Paul helped me personally to learn about the procedures and financial work of the board. I learned about Robert's Rule of Orders. Not Paul's fault that I didn't always use it. I went to Paul when I got volunteered to chair the pledge committee. My first year as board president, I asked him for ideas on how to create a successful pledge drive. He was forthcoming about what he'd seen in the work of various congregations. When I was stuck for the right words to use when talking to people about their pledges, he suggested phrasing. I felt bolstered by his support and experience. In board meetings, there were a number of times he helped me clarify issues about the budget or pledges or our endowment. I remember a few times when he and I were really worried about our finances, and then we heaved a sigh of relief when the donations came through. He also established a legacy giving program for us, which brought us matching grant money from the Shelter Rock congregation. Where I was weak in the area of finance, Paul was very strong, and I appreciate this greatly. Paul also made a strong effort to increase our adult programming, doing inquiry session, history talks, readings from UU history, and workshops. He started a very popular film series, and then Karen and committees added the extension to this film series. Not only did Paul keep us connected to the larger denomination, he made considerable strides in strengthening our social justice and outreach efforts. He became an important part of the Interfaith Alliance in our area, and we have had 3 consecutive interfaith Thanksgiving services, one of which was here at this church. Not only did Paul keep us connected to, did I say this already? In addition, Paul created partnerships with both Faith and Fellowship and Family Promise. It's strong and fruitful. He's on the regional board for Faith in Florida. He and Carol showed up for many important rallies, including the Martin Luther King Parade, the rally after Parkland, and most recently, the protest march in Stewart and the Juneteenth event. This is not even to mention the innumerable pastoral visits and calls which Paul has made. I know those have been appreciated by those suffering changes and losses. Most of the time, we see what happens on Sunday morning. Even that involves visible behind-the-scene efforts, readings, researching, thinking, choosing appropriate hymns, trying to speak with people with different theologies, varied needs. It's a challenge to any minister. I will miss Paul very much. He has been my go-to person when I had a question about practical and important matters. I will miss that strong UU presence in the pulpit and in the community. I hope we can carry forward that UU spirit as a congregation. Paul, I wish you the best wherever you may go, and I hope there are many good times you can take away from your time with us. Thank you for your commitment to this congregation. Warmly, Karen Frank, speaking for herself. And this is from Judy Clough. This year, I joined the Worship Associate Group at Treasure Coast Unitarian Universalist Congregation. Paul was both helpful and encouraging as I began to assist in presenting services. He was a good listener, and when I spoke and asked questions, I so appreciated how he eased me into the new role at church. Thank you, Paul, and I wish the best for you and Carol. And this is from Laura Letch and Dave Tarbell. Paul, Dave and I are on the road back to Long Island, so we cannot be with you this morning. We're sorry to miss your farewell. To this Long Island girl, you will always be the senior minister at the mighty Shelter Rock congregation and a prominent minister in the UUA. Working with you on the pulpit was daunting as a worship associate. However, I found you are not only an engaging and inspiring preacher, you were kind and patient. You were receptive to suggestions and complimentary for all efforts. I always came away from our services with confidence. You will be sorely missed by many. Dave and I wish you and Carol a long and healthy and joyous retirement, as you have well earned it. Please keep in touch. With love, Laura and Dave. And from Lynn Olson, I wish to express my farewell to Reverend Paul. I have a few memories to share. First, teaching Paul to remember to turn off the coffee maker in the kitchen. Second, seeing Reverend Paul fly between his Heston Hall office and the sanctuary Sunday mornings with his robes flapping behind him made me smile every time. Third, Paul was wonderful at sharing his life story with us through his sermons. He was always so open. Lastly, I think of Paul at every GA I attend in the future. It will always be great. It was always great seeing Paul and his beloved Carol at the UU General Assemblies. Both Paul and Carol did volunteer work and would catch up over drinks or lunch. Paul sang with the GA choir, as did I. We were always happy to see each other as members of the Stewart UU Church and talk about the amazing experiences we had at GA and trying to figure out what we could bring home to make work here. Good memories and a heartfelt thank you for your service to this congregation. You and Carol will be sorely missed. Please stay in touch. Lynn. And our last one is from Karen Finkinson. Paul, I will miss you. I have always enjoyed getting to know you and Carol. You gave so much to our congregation. You helped keep our finances stable. You saw us through our developmental stage. You gave us a good background on Unitarian Universalist history. You looked after the flock with your visits to our older members, and you enjoyed the fun pizza and game nights. The Covenant group meant a lot to me. Thank you for all of this. Go now in peace, but keep us in your thoughts. See you and Carol in the community. Dana.
Oh, thank you so much, everybody.
Now, Karina will call on you if you have a goodbye or a little memory to share of Paul. I don't know if you can come as good as the robes flapping, but do raise your hand.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. First of all, I'd like to thank both Paul and Carol for being a part of our community. It was really wonderful to get to know both of you, and your participation in many of the activities that we put on. Most of the activities was amazing. And thanks for coming on our adventures with us. We got to know you better and enjoy you very much. I'd also like to thank Paul for his leadership, his sermons, his knowledge of UUA, and putting up with us, which isn't easy since we like to say what's on our mind. We don't care what it is, but I'm sure the other people didn't yell out in your other churches like we tend to do here. You'll be very missed, and we wish you only the best, Fred and I, in your new adventures. And you're still, you could still come on the Adventure Club if we ever get back together as a group. It would be lovely to see you. God bless and stay well.
Thank you, Ronnie.
Okay. Paul, we were blessed to have you with us for the past 5 years. You brought with you years of knowledge and experience, which we were really lucky to benefit from. You did a really good job on most of the sermons, but I particularly like the blessing of the animals, the water blessing, and the holiday services. I remember my family goes to Pennsylvania, and one year we stayed down here for Christmas. And we went to the Christmas Eve service, and my family really enjoyed it, and you were very kind to us and came over to meet us, and I really appreciate that. You also spent a lot of time developing relationships within the community and with the community and with other ministers, and that really helped us as a congregation, that people knew more about us and knew what we stood for. So that was really good. You helped to start the multi-faith Thanksgiving service, which I think is just, I haven't been to it yet, but I think it's a wonderful thing that hopefully will happen, every year. That was really a great thing for you to do. And then you established a relationship with just one of the ones is Faith in Florida, and we did that event, that election event at our church, and they're just a couple of the things that you've done in the community that have really been helpful for us. There's one of the special memories I have of Paul is after the 2016 election. Paul, you had just started, I believe, in 2016, and the election was Tuesday, and it was Wednesday we're having our book club. I don't know if Anne remembers this, and we were all depressed, of course, and Paul just happened to come in, and he kind of walked by, and then he came in and he said something, and I can't remember what he said, but it was very comforting, Paul, and I always remember that it was a kind of a low time, and you were kind of there and comforting. So that was one thing that I remember. I just wanted to say, you and Carol have always been strong supporters of social justice issues in the community. And one thing I was very proud of was when we're getting petitions signed and everything for Medicaid expansion, which is something that Florida really needs, is that Medicaid expansion. So that was really neat. So I just want to say, I want to thank you, Paul, for all that you've done for our community, and we'll miss you. And we know that you'll continue to do good work in the community, and hopefully at some point you will come back and join with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina.
Is there anyone else?
I have many wonderful memories of Paul coming to the church. I was at the dinner that was interviewing him when he was first coming in, and I was on the board that hired him. And it was fun to get his office ready and to see the millions of, it seemed like millions of books that he brought, but the richness of his background. And I remember doing the Building Your Own Theology at Enid's house with Claudia and your wife. It was just an amazing experience. And a number of years later, I led that class, and you had so many tidbits about the many ministers of things that you had personally experienced with all of the people, the matchups that we had to do as part of the service. And it was, I just really appreciate the depth of background that you brought to us when we were just so different a congregation than you had experienced. I remember your wanting to know where we ordered flowers from, and we just said, we bring them in. This is not a church that we just bring. It's whatever shows up here. But you know, you were willing to go with the flow of things as we had to have them be. But I treasure the year that I was there for Easter, and we had the morning sunrise service, and we just put our chairs all around on the patio, and it was just exquisite, and the readings were so profound. So I treasure you and Carol. I mean, Carol always, you know, when she would give out programs, she just was so present with everybody. And so I'm glad that you were here for this part of your journey, and I wish you the very best. And I hope that I will be able to stay in touch.
Thank you, Vi. And so glad that you are feeling and doing better. That's wonderful.
I'll go. So
Okay.
as a new you, and wearing the hat of the RE coordinator, I really appreciate the guidance that I received from you and the richness of your background. And I'm also very grateful just to have belonged to the same UU community as you and Carol. It's been a pleasure, and I wish you fantastic, good fortune on your next adventures, whatever that may be. So, thank you.
Thank you, Karina. Thank you.
And Betty?
In addition to all the things that I've been connected with you in the church, I'd like to thank you for going to the Southern District cluster meetings when nobody was interested, and you drove Carol and I there several times, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Betty.
Do we have anyone else? Okay. I think we can sing. Oh, no, we have Linda.
Hi, Paul. We weren't there a lot, but going back and forth. But when you were there, I felt like there was such a continuity. I felt like from week to week, your messages were just so personal. I will take some of them with me because you were so honest about your personal experiences, especially the one about your dad. I would walk out thinking those sermons didn't send such a message with me about, if you're going to make peace, do it now. I love the movies. Even the movies had a message. The one about the man who was freezing to death through the whole movie, I thought, oh. And I realized as I walked out, the message was never give up. And I need that message right now. So anyway, but the main thing, I was so excited to have someone at our church from Minnesota, because I only knew one other person in Florida from Minnesota. Thank you so much, and I hope we will see you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you.
And did we see you raise your hand?
Okay, do you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't quite know how to get back in. I was muted. At any rate, I remember being very, very pleased at Paul's candidacy for to be our minister, because even without knowing him personally, I felt that a person who could be an active minister for 14 years at Shelter Rock knew his way around the world and knew how to live and how to deal with crises or interesting, let's say, interesting events one way or the other. And I think that that was a correct assessment, although I wasn't really looking to prove myself particularly. And I will particularly miss Carol. I felt just from meeting Carol that she was a genuine, wise, strong woman that I wanted to get to know. I most enjoyed our chats a little bit. We talked a little bit about our quote unquote children, who of course are no longer children. And Carol, I really love you, and I hope that we will somehow be together again, at least for a conversation. And Paul, I was struck by something I read in the New York Times just yesterday, that there's a group in California which is trying to have the John Wayne Airport renamed in the spirit, I think, of anti-racism, although as far as I know, it's not fixed to racism, except as the cultural acceptance of bullying is connected to racism, of course. And I thought about that a bit. And I thought to myself, you know, I have never really known a man who is like John Wayne and represents that culture, partly because I've been protected by being a UU for, I think, 45 years now. And we don't seem to attract the John Waynes of the world, thank goodness. And then I thought, on the other hand, I do know someone who punched someone in the nose. I only know of one man who did. And as much as I looked forward to all your sermons, I liked them all. I will never forget the time that you spoke of a conflict you had with a young fellow, perhaps younger than you, I don't remember exactly, about parking, having to do with parking cars. And that seems to be an iconic kind of conflict in our culture. And it terminated, or at least it developed into a physical contest where you punched the guy in the nose. And I thought, I will never forget that. Not only was I correct in thinking this minister must be well-rounded as a minister, but I thought, here before us is the illustration of what I think is the role of the minister, which is to come and live a life among us and share it. I think that's the ground rule. And here you did that in, to me, an unforgettable way. So I don't expect to hear that you continue punching people in noses, but thank you for bringing it out.
Well, I must say, Ann, that I did not punch him in the nose. He punched me and hit me over the head with the flashlight and chased me for 2 or 3 blocks with a switchblade knife.
In winter.
In winter. And I did not strike him. I tried to ward off his blows. In fact, what I tried to do was put my arms around him so he couldn't hit me. And we went down the street that was filled with cinders in a March Minneapolis street. And my whole face was really, on my chest and everything. My arms were just a mess. So, but I brought him to court and I got a judgment against him and he paid for the damage he did to my car.
Wow. Well, I must say, you pointed out to me, as I have known, that I live in a world of fantasies of my own making. And I do apologize for misremembering that whole situation. Now that you say it, I'm impressed all over again that the self-defense that you chose was the embrace of this anti-social person. Thanks again.
It was quite an experience. Boy, I'll tell you, that was really something. Yeah. And I went to his arraignment and for assault, and then a few years later, well, several months later, I didn't get called a witness. And when I finally got through to the city attorney, he said, well, that was settled by plea bargain to disturbing the peace, $50 fine.
Oh.
And I was so upset about that. I talked to a lawyer. I said, I lost work time. I had paid medical expenses. I want to sue this guy. And he said, Paul, well, he did lose his, we were staying at the same apartment place. He did lose his deposit. He had to pay for a lawyer. He spent some time in jail. He said, I think you've got your pound of flesh out of this guy. And why would you want to have anything more to do with a violent person like this? And boy, did that shape and sober me up. I completely forgot my vindictiveness and have tried to forget him. and I have done it except when I used them as a sermon illustration.
Thanks again.
Last winter, after Jerry broke 2 bones in his leg, Paul said, Janet, would Jerry like a visit? And I said, sure. And so Paul came to our home, and we had just the most fun listening to his adventures.
That happens to me regularly, which is why I'm here at the church rather than at home.
Oh, that's too bad.
But
I remember that visit. It was a great visit.
she may reappear. We can follow that up in coffee hour, which is coming up after our hymn. Was there anyone else that wanted to speak before we go to our hymn? Now, we'd like to leave Paul with this gesture of our appreciation. We know he enjoys good wine, and we've got several. I won't share them all with the group, but Paul, this is for you. Cheers.
Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate it.
Now, we're going to extinguish our flame. Never has it been more true than now. We extinguish this flame, but the sparks within us remain alight. From each of us in our supposed solitude, the signals buzz and hum, sparking through space to one another, connecting us. We are one. Our denomination's annual General Assembly is in full swing today. Go to uua.org to check for links and YouTubes. Bruce thought this postlude, which is a tune by Duke Ellington, don't get around much anymore, might be appropriate for us now. We can get around via Zoom, so stay for our coffee time. May I remind you all to send your donations to the church. As we go into coffee hour, go into gallery mode again so that you can see everybody. Shall we stay in one room or shall we break down into, there's Carol. I saw Carol.
Let's stay in one room at least for a little while, and then we'll break it into breakout rooms.
Yeah.
Sound good?
Janet and Jerry are back.
Oh,
Janet's back. She can tell the story.
I'll be unmuted. You're okay. We got lost because we had our computer in our living room and it was not plugged in. And I thought, for Pete's sakes, it would last more than an hour. And then, poof, we were gone. So we had to come plug it back in again. Oh my goodness.
And I'm worried about that here. I brought an extension cord. I plugged in. I didn't need the extension cord because there was a plug right behind me. And apparently it's not working. So, so I made it.
Janet, you're back. Why don't you tell your story?
Oh, well, my story was that when Paul came to visit us in our home, he began to talk, you know, we're just talking about experiences, talking about all of his travels. And he talked about a trip he took several years ago that was, I don't remember what airlines, but if you bought this ticket, you could fly anywhere this airline flew. And so he virtually went around the world by himself and stayed in youth hostels. And, you know, this was not a, you know, a plush trip. And it was just so interesting for him to share that sense of adventure. And we also have been very impressed with the fact that he gives his services, his sermons week after week with virtually no notes. I particularly remember the Louisa May Alcott sermon. So much history. He has such a sense of history and is so well read, and we just so much appreciated that.